The stereotype for Japanese is that Japanese women love kawaii stuff, which are cute things. The stereotype for Chinese is that women are subordinate to men. And a stereotype for Vietnamese is that they're good at nails. But a stereotype for all Asians is that we're all good at math, we eat dogs, we all look the same, and we're virus spreaders. Today, I would love to share with everyone how racism towards Asians are directed and why. From the Washington Post, Harvard holds Asian Americans to a higher standard than other races. And in 1966, Japanese Americans were referred to as the model minority from the New York Times. Magazines like Time, Fortune, and Newsweek praised Asian American groups. This model minority myth is what made many people to believe in the stereotype that all Asians are smart. This myth is also used as evidence for other minority groups. If Asians can do it, any minority group can, it says. However, this angered other minority groups towards Asians simply because of the stereotype that Asians were held accountable for. The Harvard case combined Caucasian and Asian Americans and called it reverse discrimination during their admissions, even though statistically Asians are a minority and white Americans are not. Although other minority groups were angry with Asians because Asians got roped into the same group with white Americans because apparently Asians are more privileged and we don't have it as hard. Especially with the coronavirus, the amount of Asian discrimination and hate crimes rose tremendously. According to the AFSC.org American Friends Service Committee, from March 19th through December 31st, 2020, more than 2,800 incidents of coronavirus-related verbal harassment, shunning, and physical assault on Asian Americans across the U.S. were reported to the Stop AAPI Asian American Pacific Islander Hate Reporting Center. From NBC News in LA and New York, anti-Asian hate crimes increased nearly 150% in 2020. To understand why these numbers are rising, please let me explain some background information about the correlation between Asians and the coronavirus. When the coronavirus outbreak in 2020 first came out to America's attention, former President Donald Trump would refer to the coronavirus as the Chinese flu. From the New York Times, community leaders said the biography was fueled by President Donald J. Trump, who frequently used racist language like the Chinese virus to refer to the coronavirus. This caused many people in the U.S. to believe in the stereotype that Asians were the cause of this outbreak. Not only were Chinese Americans being harassed and discriminated against, but all Asians were being dragged into the stereotype that we all are virus spreaders. You know when you ask someone their racial background or ethnicity, but you mean no offense, you're just curious? Well, what do most white Americans say? Well, in this scenario, let's just say that they respond with, well, I'm 15% French, 25% German, and so on. So they like to identify themselves as more than just a white American. There's nothing wrong with it. I actually think it's amazing people do this because they don't want to be known as one race. For Asians, it goes the same way. I would rather be known as a mixed Japanese American rather than just an Asian. And I especially dislike it when a stereotype for any race affects how they are treated in their everyday lives. A board survey was conducted by New York Times revealed the episodes of violence in the U.S. grew in numbers amid Mr. Trump's comments about the Chinese virus. In New York, xenophobia and violence were compounded by the economic fallout of the pandemic, which caused a severe blowout to New York Asian American communities and many racial assaults and being overlooked by authorities. From the New York Times, a Chinese man was walking home near Manhattan's Chinatown and was suddenly stabbed by a stranger and left to die. The perpetrator was a 23-year-old man from Yemen. He said nothing to this Chinese man before the incident and apparently had no motive. So prosecutors deemed this case as an attempt to murder and not a hate crime. On March 10, 2021, a man in Queens called an Asian American mother the Chinese virus and then spat on her infant child. And on March 16, 2021, in Atlanta, Georgia, a 21-year-old white male openly fired on multiple Asian-owned businesses, killing 8 and wounding 1. From the New York Times, the shooter, Aaron Long, killed 8 people, and 6 of them being Asian of descent. He confessed to officials he carried out the shootings as a form of vengeance for his sexual addiction, end quote. From BBC News, when Cherokee Police spokesman Captain Jay Baker denied that Aaron Long had a racial motive, Baker continued to justify Long's actions and said he was struggling with a sex addiction and he attempted to take that temptation. Captain Baker also added on to Long's defense that day, end quote, was a really bad day for him, and this is what he did. But let's just say the roles were reversed. A 21-year-old Asian male killed 8 people, 6 of them being white women. He claims he did this in rage of sexual frustration. I don't think Cherokee policeman Captain Baker would come running to his defense saying he just had a bad day and was justifying his actions. And I don't think having a bad day should justify any murder, especially of 8 people. And I hope to God that none of you either. And I know for a fact these victims' families didn't like the fact that their loved ones were killed because the shooter had a bad day or was sexually frustrated with himself. And I hope any of you would feel the same rage and sadness if one of your loved ones were killed because the shooter had a bad day or, like I said, sexually frustrated. It does not excuse what he did. These cases are just a few of many Asian hate crimes that are going unnoticed every day, whether they were reported as a hate crime or not. We need to speak up. And I am very disappointed, and I hope all of you are too, that because of racial motives, Asian Americans are targeted every day. People are afraid to leave their homes, opened up their businesses, or even being afraid of being alive. And I have reason to believe that if you were an Asian American living at this time, you would feel the same. I mean no harm to anyone and their beliefs, and I apologize if I offended anyone in any way about this topic. However, all I ask is for anyone not to discriminate, shun, get aggressive, or even violent with someone solely because of their race, what they believe in, who they love, and just who they are as a person. Racism is disgusting and unforgivable. Yes, this is a touchy subject, but we have to change. And to change, you need to talk about these kinds of things. I hope everyone learned at least one piece of information that can help them learn the perspective of living in the U.S. as an Asian American during this pandemic. Please be safe out there, and thank you so much for listening.